Hey guys, welcome to FoundFlix and another edition of Ending Explained. This time we'll be looking at As Above, So Below, as so many of you out there wanted to see. Thanks so much for voting, guys. I love hearing what you guys want me to do, and I'm more than happy to oblige, so why not go for it again? So vote for what I should do for my next Ending Explained. The first choice is Nocturnal Animals, starring Amy Adams, who discovers a mysterious manuscript that forces her to examine her past. Or Goodnight Mommy, involving twin boys that begin to suspect the identity of their mother after she returns from a surgery. Cast your vote on which one you'd like to see in the comments below, and for any video suggestions whatsoever, I'm all ears. So send them over to me on the social media platform of your choosing at FoundFlix. Thanks so much, guys. As Above, So Below is a found footage style horror film that has a bit more going on with it than might seem on the surface. The journey of a group of explorers into the catacombs of Paris follows the same structure as the classic piece of literature Dante's Inferno. In the book, the protagonist descends into hell in an effort to save his lover, making his way down 9 separate circles, each with a specific theme they represent. And it is this same essential journey to hell that these explorers are going through in the catacombs in modern-day Paris. Not every circle they visit ties directly into Dante's Inferno, but those that do bear a striking similarity that is certainly by design. But before we get into their journey, let's back up a bit, because there's another important element that is at the heart of the story: the Philosopher's Stone. This elusive substance was a concept hypothesized by alchemists, or ancient scientists, who thought the stone to be able to turn base metals into gold and has the power to grant eternal life. The stone was merely a concept until 600 years ago, when it was believed that alchemist Nicholas Flamel developed the Philosopher's Stone, granting him wealth and eternal life. And that brings us to our OP lead protagonist, Scarlett, who has 1,000,000 degrees and can speak 5 languages and of course kick some ass too. She's on her way to a location of tunnels that are soon to be destroyed that house a clue to the stone's location. Just as the tunnels are about to be destroyed, she breaks through a wall, uncovering a statue with aramid symbols covering it, known as the Rose Key, which reveals Flamel's tombstone location and home to the stone. She barely makes it out with the tunnels collapsing all around her, but right as she exits the Rose Key area, we catch a glimpse of a man hanging. This is an apparition of her dead father, who hung himself, driven to madness in his search for the stone. It's not until later in the tunnels that we understand more, but even before entering the catacombs to hell, we see that as soon as Scarlett discovered the Rose Key, grander things have already been set in motion. After heading to Paris to translate the symbols with assistance from her friend George, they head to a museum deciphering a riddle on Flamel's tombstone. It tells them that Flamel's tomb is halfway between the location of Earth related to heaven and hell. The alchemist calls 741 the number of the devil, and this indicates that hell itself is located 741 feet under the earth. So if Flamel's tomb is halfway between, then it is at 370.5 feet beneath the earth. And of course, right underneath them are the Paris Catacombs, a very real place known as the largest grave in the world, where under the streets of Paris are housed miles of tunnels containing the remains of 6 million corpses. So the group head into the catacombs with a tour guide, stumbling across the street where Flamel's cemetery was, but it's completely blocked off. But fortunately, a random guy hears their plight and offers them some advice, telling them to look for a man called Papillon. Well, that's lucky, thanks random stranger. But when they are called back to the tour group, he disappears, as he too is another vision created by the catacombs. The man tells them to seek out Papillon specifically because his story is tied to him, and wants Papillon to enter the catacombs for a specific purpose. We'll see what that's all about in a bit. On the way to meet Papillon at a club, we see yet another vision, this time a woman in a white dress who also disappears here, but shows up several times later in the film. Pap is an expert in the catacombs and has knowledge of ways to access those specific restricted areas. At first he's hesitant to take Scarlett, but she convinces him, saying they found a hidden tunnel and believe that it is filled with treasure. That's enough to get him on board, and he and the rest of his crew head into the catacombs and into the gates of hell. After making their way through the tunnels a bit, they come across another group of people down here. They're all wearing white, involved in some kind of ritual, and their leader is the same woman we saw previously at the club. They chalk it up as no big deal, but I'm pretty sure that's not a good sign. Further in the caverns, they come across 2 different paths to take. Pap insists on one way, while Scarlett says another which is much more direct to where they are headed. Pap reveals that's a bad way to go, as people who go that way don't come back. So they take the way Pap indicated, but after making their way through, find themselves back in the same spot they started, somehow having gone in a circle. Now out of options, they take the other path, removing the stones that block it. Now on the other side, they have officially entered the first layer of hell, Limbo. Here we also see the first clues hinting at the deeper journey that the group now unwittingly finds themselves on. Now that they have entered into hell, their souls are being judged, and they each have some major event they have to rectify in order to survive. For Scarlett, it involves the death of her father. She didn't answer the phone call the night that he died, and it was after this that he committed suicide, hanging himself. And the catacombs start to reveal this via visions to the group. The first thing they hear entering the area is a phone ringing. Scarlett finally tracks it down to an old-looking phone answering it, and she is greeted by a man that says, "Why won't you talk to me, Scarlett?" This indicates her personal conflict, feeling guilt over not being there for her dad and feeling some responsibility for his death. We then start to see George's story when they come across a piano, which looks exactly like one he and his brother played as children, even down to the out-of-tune A4 key. George's little brother drowned when they were kids, and he was unable to get him help in time. Thusly, George feels guilty about not being able to save his brother. So both Scarlett and George must deal with these personal sins, rectifying their souls in the process. But they don't figure that out until way later, since they're only on level 1 of their journey. Limbo is where the souls that don't go to heaven or hell are trapped for eternity, and the way we see this is represented is by Latop, a friend of Pap's they suddenly come across on the other side of the wall. He knew the tunnels better than everyone else, but one day disappeared, never to be heard from again. He must have entered and then became one of the souls damned to be trapped here. As we see, he can teleport, as well as being able to see in complete darkness. This isn't the same person that came down here, but they don't know this, and Latop guides them towards another drop, going deeper into the earth, telling them the only way out is down. Just as in Dante's Inferno, once you enter into hell, the only way out is via a door at the 9th circle and bottom of hell. They rappel down into level 2, known as Lust. The only real way this ties into Dante's Inferno is via the deafening rumbling sound that is heard when they enter the area, which is the same sound described on the level in the book. They come across an area that contains a riddle of sorts that Scarlett has to figure out before they can move forward. There's a ton of these riddles at various points in the movie, and naturally none of them pose a challenge for Super Lady Scarlett because she knows everything ever. They figure out the puzzle, removing the correct stone, entering into what is most likely Flamel's tomb. There's a man lying dead on a slab, but he doesn't appear rotted at all, even though he's been dead for hundreds of years. This must be Flamel, who did eventually die, but will never rot as an effect of his using the Philosopher's Stone. Also tying the body to Flamel, who is an alchemist, is vitriol written on the wall, which is the motto of alchemy, saying that one must visit interior parts of the earth to find the stone. You know what that means? They've got to go deeper. And Scarlett uncovers a passage underwater that leads to another room full of treasure. Aw, hell yeah! And via another puzzle, Scarlett finally finds Flamel's stone in a painting on the wall. Unfortunately, they're now on level 4, which represents greed, so all of that sweet, sweet treasure probably won't be so easy to get after all. Pap and his pals find out the hard way when they pull the gate off, causing the ceiling to collapse all around them. So we see the treasure was actually a trap designed to punish the greedy that encounter and try to take it. Susie is injured in the collapse, but is able to be healed when Scarlett applies some of the stone onto her wounds, showing us the power of the stone. Well, it's not the real stone, but a false one that only works once. Curse those ancient riddles and traps. Scarlett uncovers a hidden passageway in a pool of water, leading to yet another tight cavern, sending them further down. On the next level, they find writing above a tunnel reading, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here." In Dante's Inferno, this is written over the gates of hell, but they're already well on their way into hell at this point. What occurs next ties back into what they figured out in the museum with Flamel's tombstone. His body is said to be buried at the center of the earth, and from here the group continues downward, which they realize is actually a reverse of the room where they just were. That's because they passed through the center of the earth here and are now on the other side, which is a reflection of where they have been previously. Now they're getting closer and deeper into the dark side of the earth, going further down towards the final circle. Now on level 7 Violence, they enter a reverse version of Flamel's tomb, where his body is now seen rotten unlike before. Here they find an unresponsive Latop, who Susie cautiously approaches. He attacks her, killing her by bashing her head into the ground repeatedly. So obviously that was pretty violent, which ties into the theme of this level, but there's also the characters' respective sins, as I mentioned with George and Scarlett. We never find out Susie's backstory, but based on what happens, she must have violently killed someone in the past and is now being punished for her sin by being violently murdered herself. That's how things kind of work around here. We see the same basic concept befall our cameraman Benji, who is about to climb down another hole, but at this point is still on level 8, which is fraud. We also don't know Benji's backstory, but can kind of figure it out by what happens. First, he hears a distant baby crying, followed by the same woman seen twice earlier holding a baby, who lunges at Benji, causing him to fall down the hole to his death. Based on this, he must have had a child with a woman and hurt them in some way, and that's why he's now being punished. Neither Susie or Benji are really given a chance to rectify their sins, and it's not until Papillon has his experience on our final level, level 9, called Treachery, that we understand a bit more about what the deal is. They come across a burning car with a man in the back seat, the same man in the catacombs that told Scarlett to seek out Pap in the first place. And we see this is why he wanted him to enter the catacombs. It appears that Pap betrayed the man who burned alive in the car, but when presented with this vision, he does not claim responsibility for what happened, saying it wasn't his fault. Since he is unwilling to confess to his sin, he is grabbed by the burning man who pulls him into the car, which then swallows into itself, disappearing, and leaves Pap buried upside down with his legs the only part of his body still visible. This specific death is also a direct reference to Dante's Inferno, with character Virgil mentioning someone suffering the same fate. So as I mentioned, they finally made it to the final circle of hell, and while passing through a dark area, they come across a hooded figure who is sitting in a wooden chair. As level 9 is said to house Satan himself, that is most likely who this is supposed to represent here. But he doesn't look that scary though, just kind of chilling in a wicker chair like that. So the final 3 survivors, George, Zed, and Scarlett, hightail it past him, and a face on the wall comes to life, attacking George and deeply biting into his neck. They drag his body away, and Scarlett attempts to use the stone once again, but it doesn't work because, as I mentioned, it's a fake and is yet another test from those wacky alchemists. The whole main concept is about rectifying for your sins, and in this case, Scarlett must rectify her sin of stealing the stone by returning it to where she found it. Only then will she find the true stone. So she traverses all the way back to where she found it, encountering a much more hostile environment, like rivers of blood with hands coming out of it and mouths biting out from the ground. She makes her way through and returns the stone to its original place, causing all the weird noises going on to suddenly stop. Scarlett looks into a mirror, seeing her blood-covered reflection. What she realizes in this moment is that there is no physical stone. The power is within her. It's based on one's faith in the stone, faith in oneself, and faith in God. So by returning the fake stone and having faith, Scarlett now has taken on the powers of the stone herself. On her way back to the others, Scarlett comes across a hanged body, which we've seen as early as that first scene back in Nambia. This of course represents her father, and she apologizes to him for not picking up the phone that fateful night, and his body vanishes. So as mentioned with the others, Scarlett's particular sin was her choosing to ignore her father's literal call for help, and now that she has rectified it and apologized for what she's done, her soul is now cleansed. She makes it back to Zed and George, healing George's wound with her hands, confirming she now has the stone's power. They keep moving with more hooded figures showing up right on their tail, but they reach a dead end. Then they find another deeper well, but they won't be able to climb their way out. They have finally reached the bottom of hell, and this passage is their exit back to the real world. But before they can go, all of them must confess to their sins. George explains about his brother's death and that his leg got pinned. George went off to get help, but his brother drowned waiting for him to save him. And Zed says he has a child he's never seen. He knows it's his, but denies it. So now that they all have rectified their sins, they all hold hands and jump into the well, a literal leap of faith. They fall for a really long time, finally reaching the bottom with a huge crash. Uncovering some rocks, they find a manhole, which they use to finally make it back to the real world. George and Scarlett hug, having survived this insane ordeal, and Zed just kind of walks off. Alright, see you later, bud. We just went through hell and stuff. No big deal, I guess. So in the end, thanks to rectifying themselves for their sins and taking a final leap of faith, the 3 were able to descend through the 9 circles of hell and ultimately make it out alive. Though I do wonder what Scarlett will do with her powers now. At least she knows the truth about the stone, and that's all she was really looking for in the first place. Alright, that'll do it for my analysis and explaining the ending for As Above, So Below. What did you guys think of the movie? And make sure to vote on which ending explained I should do next. Nocturnal Animals or Goodnight Mommy. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow. Thanks for watching FoundFlix. See you next time.